Stephen, you ready? Yeah. Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Tonight, is the anniversary of the Rebbe's leadership in 1951 on the 10th day of Shvat. It's a day when the previous Rebbe passed away in 1950, and 1 year later, his son-in-law, the Rebbe, accepted the mantle of leadership despite tremendous refusals from the Rebbe's part. You know, the previous Rebbe had three daughters and three sons-in-law. Right. One of them was murdered by the Nazis. I visited his grave in Dnipropetrovsk in Ukraine. But the other two, the older one was the Rashag, Reb Shmar Yogarari, and the younger one was the Rebbe. So some people wanted the older brother-in-law to become the Rebbe, the next Rebbe, but most people understood that the specialty, which was our Rebbe, and every time they asked the Rebbe would say no. Until something happened on this date, 1 year later, when the Rebbe came in, and nobody even really knew what he was going to do, but he came in and he accepted the mantle of the leadership. And how did he do that? He accepted the mantle of leadership by teaching this Maamar that we're about to learn right now. You see, a Maamar is the magnus opus of a Rebbe. A Rebbe is the spiritual lead of a generation, is the shepherd of the generation. So each of the Chabad Rebbes, all 7 of them, would teach their wisdom, their teachings in the form of discourses known as Maamarim, right? So there was like informal talks called sichas, and then there was formal deep dives, like it's called snorkel and scuba, right? Like the lighter and the heavier. A discourse is something which is not casual reading. A discourse is something, a Maamar is something which you need to read and to study and to reflect and to ponder and to meditate. You know, we've learned many Maamarim together. For example, V'yodaita Maskeva was a Maamar, right? And we turned it into a book, which, by the way, is becoming a revolution. I was in a bookstore yesterday in Crown Heights, and it's selling like hotcakes. It's incredible. It's still selling. It's really amazing. My daughter and my teenage daughter brought a friend over, and her friend is studying my book. And she asked me all sorts of questions. It was such a beautiful conversation to have with a 17-year-old teenager to talk about Hasidus, because this is the essence. Well, a Rebbe captures his essence in his discourse. So when the previous Rebbe prepared a discourse for the 10th of Shvat, 1950, the day that ultimately he passed away on, but he prepared it to be published on that day, for that day, it captures the essence of the previous Rebbe, right? Especially since it was the last discourse that he taught upon this earth. And that's why when the Rebbe became Rebbe, the Rebbe took that same discourse from 1950, from this date, the date of the previous Rebbe's passing of 1950, 10th of Shvat, and the Rebbe expounded upon it every year on the 10th of Shvat. There's 20 chapters in the original discourse, and the Rebbe would expound each year, would elaborate on one of those chapters for the next 20 years. So the Rebbe would deliver a discourse every year for the next 20 years. And then he went from 1951 to 1971, each year on Yud Shvat, teaching a new discourse on a different chapter. And then he started all over again, all 20 chapters.
So he never had his own Maamar.
The Rebbe was so profoundly humble that he would always refer to the previous Rebbe as the Rebbe of the generation. So he would see himself as the teacher of the previous Rebbe's teachings.
He never called himself Rebbe.
Now, the Rebbe did have a tremendous amount of his own teachings, tremendous. But at least on the 10th day of Shvat, he would teach the teaching of expound. When you learn any of the Rebbe's Maamarim, by the way, the Rebbe will always say, and the Alter Rebbe explains, or the previous Rebbe explains, or the Rebbe Rashab explains, and then he would expound. And he wouldn't even say, when you read the Rebbe's Maamarim, he doesn't even say, and this is the explanation for, he says, and maybe you could say that, whenever it says, and maybe you could say V'yesh Lomar, you know the Rebbe is saying something novel. But he introduces himself with such humility, it's sensational. You don't see it in the selfie generation. You know, one of my grandmothers, she doesn't know how to say selfie. So she calls it a selfish. Yeah, let's take a selfish. You want to take a selfish? Let's take a selfish. You want to take a selfish? It's probably more accurate to call it a selfish, right? So let's take a look at this discourse. Now, I'm going to post a link to the discourse in the comments section here so everybody can follow along. And we're going to take a look at it. Oh, no, it didn't work. Ooh.
Yeah.
From where I stand.
Killed the other one. Oh, I saw the other one.
Oh, that did work. Okay, fine. So let's post the link here. I'm posting it in the comments, and let's go straight into it. This discourse is, let's call it the source text is above. Good. So this discourse, Bosi LeGani, is sensational. Okay, it is. Let's call it the vision statement of the Rebbe's leadership. So when people look at the Rebbe, what do they think about? They think of the Chabad House movement. Do they think about the tefillin on street corners? Do they think of the Rebbe giving out dollars? Do they think of miracles and prophecies? What is the Rebbe? What is the Rebbe? That is Bosi LeGani. That is Bosi LeGani. That is this discourse, Bosi LeGani, which we're going to learn. If you're able to finish this discourse with me, if you're able to work your way through this discourse with me, Bosi LeGani, it's gonna take us some time. But if you're able to work through this discourse with me, I urge you and encourage you to take notes, to review the notes, to review the discourse. You have the original English translation here with you. Study it, meditate on it, think about it, sleep on it, walk on it. You know, when you walk in the street, have in your mind that this discourse I'm going to study. While I'm walking the street, while I'm driving down the road, and when you do that, you'll be able to infuse consciousness and awareness in your life. You'll raise the bar. It's going to be very, very beautiful. Let's go straight into it. So the Maamar begins with this quote from Song of Songs, and you'll see it in the text. I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. This is Song of Songs of King Solomon, chapter 5, verse 1. I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. Now, when you read the Song of Songs, it's very difficult to understand what King Solomon is talking about. Song of Songs is a great read. We always read it. My family reads it. My father reads it after the Seder. Every year after the Seder. Shira shirim asher lishleimo yishakeini minashika yispiu. It's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. You after 4 glasses of wine, about 8 pounds of matzah, a little bit of brisket. I mean, it's a very spiritual moment, And when you read it, you're up there, you figure King Solomon's onto something, But what is he really talking about? King Solomon was the wisest of all men. These are enigmatic quotes. It takes a Maamar of our Rebbe to explain what he's even talking about. The Rebbe explains as follows. I'm going to give a quick aerial overview before we go dive into it, because it's very important to me. You should see this text originally in the original text. The Maamar, the Medrash explains that what it means when it says, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride, it's talking about God when he enters into the temple, into the tabernacle, when the tabernacle was first built. Stephen, do you have any idea when the tabernacle was first built? Do you know what the tabernacle is? Do you know what the temple is? Temple in Jerusalem. Before the temple in Jerusalem was built by King Solomon, the first temple, there was a temporary tabernacle, a temporary temple, which was portable, which the Jews built for 40 years. They traveled through the desert when they came out of Egypt. 7 weeks after they came out of Egypt, they got the Torah in Mount Sinai, and God tells them to build a tabernacle. They build this tabernacle, which is a portable shul. It's like the size of our shul approximately. And they would erect and disassemble, right?
Yeah,
this thing as they would travel through the desert. It was a portable shul. This tabernacle was a stunning novelty. Why? Because it was the first time in human history that human beings built a home for God. I mean, that's an amazing thing. It was the first time in human history that mortal beings were able to build a home for an immortal God. That finite beings were able to build a home for an infinite God. That's like amazing. It's an amazing, amazing achievement. And about that moment, when the Jewish people built this home for God, it says, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. What does this mean? I've returned to my garden. I've come to my garden. This is my place. The Rebbe explains that it means that God had already been here before. When had God already been here before? God had been here in this world. His essence was manifest in this world inside the Garden of Eden. That's when God was already fully manifest in this world. When Adam and Eve were talking to God in the Garden of Eden, they were fully conversational. They're having chats in the Garden of Eden. God was fully present in the Garden of Eden. But then what happened was they did the sin of the tree of knowledge. Once they did the sin of the tree of knowledge, what happened was that God self-expelled himself from this world to the 7 heavens, so to the first rung of heaven. Then came the sin of Cain killing Abel. Then God self-expelled to the 2nd heaven. And 7 total sins, like, the sin of the generation of the flood, the sin of the Tower of Babel, led to God self-expelling to the 7th heaven, right? Think of what happens in a marriage. I want you to think about this for a moment in a marriage. Imagine you're deeply in love and then your spouse insults you or embarrasses you in public, what happens? You're like, you'll disassociate. Be like, whoa, I'm putting my guards up.
Yep.
I'm not comfortable. I don't feel safe. Right? When it's intimate, you lower your guards, you lower your hair, you connect. But the moment that you feel insecure, that you feel violated, you withdraw. And imagine it happens 6 more times. By the end of the 6th time, you're like 10-foot pole distance from each other, right? Then came 7 great mitzvahs: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Levi, these are all son after son. Levi, Kehat, Amram, and who was the famous son of Amram was Moses. 7 righteous men who brought, like 7 nice things that the spouse does for you, right? And then you're like, oh, I feel safer. Lower the guard until you're back in full form intimacy, right? And that's why it says by Moses on Mount Sinai, it says Vayered Havaya Lar Sinai, and God descended on Mount Sinai. That was a big deal. That God himself descended on Mount Sinai, which manifests in the miracles of Sinai when they saw the sounds and they heard the sights. These are miraculous manifestations, right? These miraculous manifestations were the expression of God's essence in this world, was God's return to this world. And in fact, where did God, that was just a temporary revelation of Mount Sinai, but where was God permanently housed? God was permanently housed in the tabernacle, in the Beis HaMikdash, right? How do we know that God was permanently housed in the Beis HaMikdash? Because when you walked into the Holy of Holies, it was an amazing thing. We've spoken about this before. In the Holy of Holies, if you took a measurement from one wall to the other wall, it was a fixed measure. In the middle of the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant with the 2 holy cherubs. And the 10 Commandments were inside this box. If you measured the box, it had an exact measurement. But if you measured from the wall to the edge of the box and the wall to the edge of the box, it took up no space. So let's say it was 20 feet from wall to wall, right? And let's say the box was 5 feet. You'd think that there would be 7.5 feet, right, on each side. You'd think, right? But there wasn't. There was 10 feet here, 10 feet there, and this thing was 5 feet. It made no sense. Was it there? Was it not there? Because it was the manifestation of infinity, which was measure and non-measure simultaneous, finite and non-finite at the same time, present and not present at the same time. That is the manifestation of infinity. That is something which is not of this world. Today's Torah study is sponsored by Karina Nadel in loving memory of her mother, Tebekela Bas Yitzchak HaKohen, on the occasion of her yortzeit today.
So in the
May her soul be elevated in Gan Eden in the merit of this mitzvah.
So in the Ark of the Covenant, you have both sets of tablets broken as well as
yes, inside the Ark of the Covenant, there was both sets of tablets, exactly. But now that is the general context with which we start the Bosi LeGani. Bosi LeGani is the discourse of the previous Rebbe, which means I've returned to my garden. Now we are getting some context into where we're going with this discourse. Now, in the context of where this is going long term, the Rebbe was saying, very nice, God's presence was brought into this world, into the Holy of Holies, into the tabernacle, but that was a permanent space, but it was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. What happened when the temple was destroyed? God's presence, it wasn't destroyed for nothing, it was destroyed for our sins. And because of our sins, we were exiled from our land, so we're back to step 1. And it's our job to bring back the divine presence to this world. Now, who was it that brought down the presence of God to this actual world? It's Moses. Why Moses? The Maamar says, the Medrash says, because the 7th is beloved. Something about the 7th which we don't understand is that the 7th is beloved. Now, here the Rebbe was hinting to the fact. He didn't explicitly say it, but the Rebbe was hinting to the fact that who was the 7th Rebbe of the Chabad Rebbes? There was the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, the Mittel Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the 6th Rebbe. Now was the beginning of 7th Rebbe. And it's the job of the 7th. The Rebbe was saying the job of the 7th is to finish the deal. It's to kick the ball over the finish line. It's to get to home run, to get to home base. And that is the mission of our generation. The Rebbe was setting the stage. He was kind of like putting out the vision statement. Here I am, new Rebbe, right? Okay. Our generation's job is to bring Mashiach. Because what's Mashiach? Mashiach is a state of divine consciousness. Divine awareness with godliness will be revealed all over the world. That is the purpose of our existence in this world. That is what we're here to do, folks. And until we don't finish that, we cannot pat ourselves on the shoulders and say, oh, we're doing a great job. We're not. We have got to bring Mashiach. Now, how does that work? What does that entail? What is the process to bring Mashiach? That's what we're going to learn about in this discourse. The discourse is going to teach us about many, many, many different themes. For example, where the divine presence appears. Normally, naturally, by default, in the highest heavens. How it descends to this world. You know what it takes to bring the divine presence to this world? The discourse is going to tell us that it's the transformation of darkness into light. Transformation of darkness into light, which means that when you encounter spiritual darkness, like anti-Semitism, like a father-in-law that ridicules your Shabbos observance, like a wife that thinks you lost your mind because you want to daven every day, right? When you encounter your own proclivity towards superficiality instead of essence, when you're drawn to things that are not good for you because they look so good, even though you're aware that you should not be doing that. When you realize the dysfunction in your life, and nevertheless, you still overcome the temptation, the seduction, the confusion, the distraction, the chaos, the disorder, and you do what you have to do. Now you're transforming darkness into light. And that, as the Bosi LeGani is about to quote from the Zohar, when the other side is suppressed, when the dark side is suppressed, then the infinite light of God Almighty shines in this world. You want to shine God's infinite light in this world, it happens through overcoming darkness. So if you feel like your life is a mess, good. It means you got the tools to bring Mashiach. We're also going to learn about the sacrifices in the Holy Temple. We're going to learn about how the temple was the code to bring divine presence into this world. We're going to learn about what the sacrifices represent, what the animal offerings represent. We're going to learn about what the construction materials of the tabernacle represent and how we are able to manifest that in our own lives. Because remember what it says in the verse. When after the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, after the Jewish people had built the Holy Temple, it says, well, part of the instruction of building the Holy Temple, it says, and you should do all these things and donate all these 15 objects, gold, silver, whatever, woods, purple wools and stuff to build the Holy Temple. It says, what's the purpose of building this Holy Temple? V'asuli mikdash, and they shall make for me a sanctuary. V'shochanti, and I shall dwell with them. Betocham, with them, within them. It doesn't say that I shall dwell within it, because God is not seeking to dwell in a structure of brick and mortar as much as he's looking to dwell inside of each and every one of us. We are a temple. And this is a resounding theme, a recurring theme throughout the discourse that speaks about how you are a temple. Can you imagine living your whole life and not knowing for even 15 seconds of your life what your purpose is? Can you imagine somebody on his deathbed and I'm the rabbi and I ask him, no, what can you share with me? What would you like me to let you know, your family know? Your grandchildren are still young. What would you like me to tell them? I'm your rabbi. Give me something when we share with your grandkids. You say, tell them not to put too much pepper in the matzah balls.
Good idea.
I mean, okay, got it, but there's got to be more, man. There's got to be more to life than the recipe, right? For whatever reason, this world is so spiritually dark that most people grow up in the darkness without ever even knowing that they're in the darkness. They think they're in the light. But for whatever reason, we around this table, around this YouTube thing, have been selected by divine providence to experience the revelation of the teachings of the spiritual leader of our generation. And we are able to have a glimmer of consciousness, which we can tap into. So let's do it. Let's go straight into it, right?
Rabbi,
yes, sir.
Since God came down to level 1 at Sinai, when the golden calf was created, did he move back at all?
Yes. I believe that the golden calf was the beginning of the self-expulsion. Yes, exactly. Let's take a look. We're going to study, now that we got an aerial overview, we're going to get out of the helicopter. We land in the helicopter. And we're going to go into the grassroots, ground forces. Ready? Ground forces. All right, good. So we got the discourse, folks. I posted it to the WhatsApp group and to the YouTube. Let's learn some of this inside the text. I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim 5:1. Shir Hashirim, the Medrash explains, is not to be taken at face value. It is a metaphor describing the ongoing relationship between God and his bride, the Jewish people. The above verse, for example, refers to the time of the construction of the sanctuary, when the divine presence, the Shekhinah, came into his garden. You want a copy? You want a link? Yeah. How do I send it to your link? If you go to my YouTube, you'll get a link. It's on YouTube. Okay. The above verse, for example, refers to the time of the construction of the sanctuary when the divine presence came into his garden. For it was then that the divine presence, distant for a time, was again revealed in this world. So that's what it means. I've come to my garden. I've returned to my place of comfort. The Hebrew word that means my garden is now discussed. The Medrash on the verse observes that the word is not legan. I've come to the garden, but it says LeGani, Bosi LeGani, which means to my garden. And the Medrash explains when it says to my garden, what's a garden? A garden is a beautiful place, a place of pleasure and delight and luscious, delicious fruits and nice shade and prettiness and stuff, right? So the garden, my garden, means my place of pleasure, right? And the Medrash explains this means Lignuni, which means my bridal chamber. And that's an interesting Hebrew etymological connection between a garden and a bridal chamber. Bridal chamber is a place of great pleasure. It's a place of intimacy. So when God is saying, I've come to my garden, he's saying much more than my garden. He's saying, I've come to my bridal chamber, which is the place of my intimacy, the place of my connection, the place of where I put my hair down, the place where I reveal myself without inhibition. For as the commentaries of the Medrash explain, this possessive form implies a private place, such as the chamber in which the spiritual union of groom and bride is consummated. The divine presence is thus saying, I've come into my bridal chamber, and to the place in which my essence was originally revealed. The bridal chamber is the place where the bride reveals herself. And this is God saying, I've come to my bridal chamber. I just want to spend a few quick moments over here talking about this. I want to spend a few quick moments talking about the difference between sexuality and intimacy. Can anybody tell me the difference? Do you know what sexuality is? Good answer.
But intimacy is a closeness.
It doesn't have to be physical.
Well, no, it could be physical, but it's also it's giving of yourself. Yeah, it's intimacy with another.
Intimacy with another.
It's really
giving of yourself. It's an openness.
Yes.
Sexuality is just a physical act without any emotion. Intimacy is a physical act as part of the emotional connection.
So sexuality is an expression of intimacy.
But it doesn't have to be.
No.
Doesn't it? No, it's not what you're saying?
Non-intimate.
Sexuality can exist without intimacy. I don't believe intimacy can exist without sexuality.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. So I think what happens is that we live in a world today which hyper focuses sexuality and underemphasizes intimacy. When you talk about, the culture in which we live in is so incredibly superficial that it actively separates sexuality from any meaningful form of intimacy. Think of what happened, since the invention of birth control, that we were taught that sex is something to be enjoyed, it's healthy, it's free, it's no obligation, no commitment, right? And they talk about words like seeing someone. Seeing someone? You're seeing someone? Can I see them too?
Sure.
No. Right. Well, seeing means it's non-commitmental. We're seeing each other, right? Oh. What does it mean we're dating? What does that mean we're dating? I'm dating someone. Does that mean we're aging together?
You see,
we're getting older by the minute. What does that mean, dating?
You weren't around in the 60s, really. So.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I'm cautious of where I'm treading in the presence of my elders, but exactly, it's superficial. Exactly right. It's very superficial. It's klippa, right?
That is a bad analogy. It's the internet now, which for young men especially, and you hear a lot of criticism now, which
focuses on the external, superficial,
completely on the external,
divorcing the internal from the external,
which then does great damage to these young boys' ability
to be intimate.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's young girls as well.
Yeah, the term is toxic masculinity, and it was coined in 1990. And interestingly, since 2020 till today, 20,000 articles have been written on it, yet there's no research that supports that it exists. It's just a term that has been created and has now become pervasive.
So
I just studied it.
Let me just comment on this. So I just want to say, you know what else they say in today's culture? They talk about another term, which is just so shallow. It's painful. They're hooking up. We're hooking up.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it sounds like a bunch of mechanical pipes. Sounds like a plumbing operation. That's what they're doing. Exactly. They're just hooking up and they're dishooking, unhooking, right? What? No, it's more modern. Much more modern, right? But look what that term represents. It's non-commitmental. There's no intimacy here. There's a one-night stand thing, Majega. Or there's another one. I mean, the most boring of all. I mean, to reduce human intimacy, which is the most deep, rich, rewarding experience possible. To reduce it to the most, to literally to a snore, is when they say, we're sleeping together. I mean, seriously, could there be anything more boring? Yeah, we just, we sleep. I mean, come on, This is the culture which we live in, which separates.
It's worse than that. They're now creating AI models where you do not even have to interact and try to experience the intimacy or the sexuality with something that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, it's all an apparition. Yeah. So what I'm saying is when the Maamar tells us, I've come to my bridal chamber, the bridal chamber is not to be interpreted in terms of the sexual revolution. A bridal chamber is a place where man and woman are able to experience not just a physical bond, but what is intimacy, which is a spiritual bond. It's a soul connection. And you cannot experience that intimacy when you're not emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, and spiritually in sync. This is the dance, which is human connection, which is so much more than the way it's being reduced and what's the word? Just entirely. I can't even think of the word, but the way it's being just completely reduced to whatever. I can't find the word. I'm sorry.
It's a pure physical animalistic.
It's an animalistic drive. It's nothing else. When God returns to his bridal chamber, it means this is the place of my safety. This is the place of my connection. This is where I connect to my deepest love, which is humanity, which is my chosen people, my Jewish people, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I was there with you guys 2,448 years ago, and it took us almost 2,500 years, but we're back together again now that I've returned to my garden. Rebbe, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with why they would use bridal chamber, which is really a one-time thing. You have that one moment after the chuppah where you're in the bridal chamber. Why wouldn't they say, I return to your marriage bedroom?
Okay, so good point. But I think that that's actually what bridal chamber means. Let me explain to you what it means. I'll prove to you. So how do you say intimacy in Hebrew? That's a difficult word to translate. But when the bride and groom finish when he breaks the cup and they finish 7 blessings and the chuppah, they go into something called the cheder yichud. Cheder means a room. Cheder means a room. Yichud, but yichud doesn't only mean private room. It means the Cheder Yichud, the room of oneness. That's what Yichud means, the room of oneness. Because what happens in that room, that it's the first time ever that man and woman are allowed to be alone together, because there is a prohibition of a single male being with a single female, a prohibition called Yichud. You're not allowed to be alone in a room with somebody that technically could evolve into a relationship of the opposite gender, because intimacy is aloneness. Intimacy is oneness. So the same word for bridal chamber of the wedding night is the same word of any time that you're together with your wife alone. In a hotel room 67 years later, it doesn't make a difference. In your bed, wherever you are, that's yichud, which is oneness, which I'm translating as intimacy. It's the same word. And what's so interesting from the Medrash is Bosi LeGani, I've returned to my garden, means I've returned to my bridal chamber. Lignuni is what the Medrash means, is what King Solomon means to allude to when he says I've returned to my garden. So let's look at this idea in the text and we'll finish it up over here. The divine presence is thus saying, I've come into my bridal chamber, not just wedding night, every night, into the place in which my essence was originally revealed. The Medrash continues, in the beginning, the essence of the divine presence was apparent in this lowly world. However, in the wake of the cosmic sin of the tree of knowledge, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, departed from the earth and rose into the heavens later, on account of the sin of Cain and the sin of Enosh, which was the sin of idolatry. The divine presence withdrew even further from this world, rising from the nearest heaven to the second and then to the third heaven. Later, yet, the sins of the generation of the deluge, that was the flood of Noah, caused it to recede from the third heaven to the fourth, and so on. This progressive recession of the revealed divine presence is alluded to in the wording of the verse that relates that Adam and Eve heard the sound of God walking about in the garden. It said that they heard the sound of God, mit halech, in the garden. The word mitalech is not a word that you can properly translate. It means walking, but the text, the tense of the word mitalech is a passive tense, right? It's a passive tense. I don't think you can translate to English, which implies that God was withdrawing, because the passive tense means that it wasn't active. It means that God wasn't there anymore. God was sort of spoken about in the third person, right? Let's take a look. This progressive, here, Rebbe Abba notes the verse does not state the expected form of the verb mehalech, which is the active tense, but rather mithalech, which is the passive tense, suggesting that they heard the divine presence springing back in successive stages of withdrawal, just like a spouse might withdraw when criticized, when feeling unsafe, when the intimacy has been violated. The Medrash proceeds to explain that after the sins of 7 generations, it caused the divine presence to withdraw 7 spiritual levels from its initial manifestation in this world. 7 righteous men, tzaddikim, arose, whose divine service drew the divine presence down once more into this world below. Remember, the Jewish people are one organism. So we are all responsible for each other. We expelled our husband, God, and now we're inviting our husband back. It's like having a fight with your spouse. You can make up afterwards. Through the merit of Abraham, the Shekhinah was brought down from the 7th heaven to the 6th. Through the merit of Yitzchak, the Shekhinah was brought down from the 6th heaven to the 5th, and so on until Moses, the 7th. That's key. The 7th of these tzaddikim. And here's the very important, in the original Maamar of the previous Rebbe, it says, and all those who are 7th are cherished. Kol hashvin chaviv. And here's the hint, that all the 7ths are cherished. He drew the revelation of the divine Shekhinah down once again into this world below. And that's why it says in the story of Sinai, and God descended onto the mountain. Go ahead, Chuck.
You describe a precondition which is necessary before Mashiach comes to the lower world.
What's the precondition? I'm sorry. I said something?
You've been describing the precondition that has to exist in order for the Mashiach.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, you've described it in many words, right? The spiritual connectivity and other things that have to pre-exist among us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Darkness and light.
So what's going to cause that precondition to happen?
You.
If it doesn't happen, but it has to be universal among all
Nope.
of us.
Starts with you. We can learn that in this discourse.
So
You worry about yourself. That's all. You worry about yourself. You don't have to solve North Korea. You don't have to deal with the Persian Gulf. We have to, each one of us has to worry about ourselves. Seriously, that's what it's about.
I understand that, but it still requires universal 100%.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it requires universal 100%. Maybe it's 51%. Maybe it's 31%. Maybe it's 11%. I don't know. There's a tipping point that's going to happen. I don't know.
Okay.
Divinity was primarily, listen, when a Jew from Balanels is able to experience a paradigm shift to the point that this question is important to him, I think right there is the paradigm shift already. The fact that you can even ask this question shows that you've come so far. It's unbelievable, right? It's beautiful. Let's just wrap this up. Divinity was primarily revealed in the Holy Temple, in the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash means the Holy Temple. As it is written, and they shall make me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell within them. We're going to stop right here, because I think that's a good place to stop, where we just introduced here the concept of Bosi LeGani. We now know what we're talking about. We got an aerial overview of where we're going. Very aerial. I didn't give you the whole picture. There's 20 chapters here, right? But we understand where we fit into the great story of Jewish history, of human history. We are the closers, folks. You know, you have a soccer team, right? You got a soccer team. I would use a football analogy, but I don't understand how the game goes on if they stop every 15 seconds. I don't understand. So the soccer game, at least they keep on moving the ball. So commercials.
If you were hit by a guy who was 6'8" and weighed 300 pounds, you need 15 seconds.
Anyways, so I go back to soccer. It's a game I relate to. You know, you got the goalie kicks the ball, and it goes to the back, and the back passes the left wing, and the left wing to the midfielder, and the midfielder to the right wing, back to the left wing, back to the back to the front, until ultimately the ball is in the hands of the striker. The striker, he's in the goalie box of the opposite team, and he's not even offside. And he's saying, give me the ball. And guess what? They kick him the ball. And the ball is right there at his feet. And the goalie's not even there because the goalie was distracted with something else. And all he has to do is kick it in the ball. That is us. We are that generation. We are the seventh generation. We're the very, very end of the seventh generation. The Rebbe said this discourse in 1951, right? We are now 76, 75 years later, right? Where we're at the very end. We're actually, I never thought of that. We're in the 77th year of this teaching. Yeah, we're in the 77th year of this, 1950. We're in the 77th year, OMG. The seventh is the closer. And we're now, tonight, entering the 77th year of the seventh generation. Whoa. Seventh generation, 77 years. And that starts tonight.
I'm packing my bag.
Whoa. Could it be that this is what we've all been waiting for? We're the striker, folks. We've already kicked the ball, and the ball is sort of like running. I don't know. We got to be still involved, but we're trying to kick it over the line, right? Maybe you know what we're doing. We're fighting over with the goalie. We're dribbling with the goalie. That's what we're doing. We're dribbling with the goalie, and now we're about to kick it in the goals, and that's where we fit in. And the rest of the team, the stand. You know who's in the stadium? In the stadium, you see your grandmother. You see King David, King Solomon, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You see Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. You see your mother. She's up there in the stands, right? And they're all waiting for you. But then there's the rest of the generations that came before you, and they're all in the field, and they're like, and what are we doing? We're like, we go to tea time. And they're like,
hear that? Check the ball.
Kick the ball. We've been waiting for you for 5,786 years. Could you just do your tea time some other time? This is where we fit in, folks. Let's not be sleeping on the job. We're going to bring Mashiach now. Thank you.